Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our News Watch unit, and we're going to talk about a couple of news stories that you might find interesting. One is about collecting water from the air, which may help people who lack water, like maybe in California or the Atacama Desert in Chile or something like that. And then we're also going to talk about the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. That happened some time ago, but this still is a valid story that we need to talk about.
Yeah, and you can certainly learn some of these great words that are in here. Yeah, there's a magic sponge that scientists have invented, so it's kind of fun. And again, it was a big deal when Queen Elizabeth II passed away. She had a very, 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 very long reign, also a very long life. We're going to talk about her and also her son who has become king since her passing. But right now, we're going to read through this News Watch unit. We're going to read through both stories and then come back.
Researchers at Jordan's Royal Scientific Society, RSS, have invented a device that can harvest water from the air, even dry desert air. The machine is composed of a special sponge made of metal centers linked by an organic carbon framework. This structure allows it to capture water molecules in the air. These can later be squeezed out of the sponge as drinking water. To deal with changes in temperature and humidity, the team devised an algorithm that allows the machine to harvest more water when conditions are ideal, but conserve power when they're not. This boosts its efficiency and means it can produce up to 35 liters of water per day at a price that's 46% cheaper than bottled water. Experts say the machine and the framework it uses have the potential to solve water crises around the world. What the team needs to do next is find ways to manufacture the device more cheaply and at a larger scale. With government assistance, it hopes to produce units for households by mid-2023.
Queen Elizabeth's passing marks end of an era for UK. When the UK's Queen Elizabeth II passed away on September 8, 2022, it marked the end of an era. She was the UK's longest reigning monarch, having been on the throne for 70 years and 214 days. The UK entered a period of national mourning following the Queen's death. Before the state funeral, which took place on September 19th, the Queen's body lay in state, meaning her coffin was placed in a public building, Westminster Hall, to allow members of the public to pay their respects. Over 5 days, an estimated 250,000 people did so. The line was approximately 16 kilometers long, with people waiting around 25 hours to say farewell. King Charles III is now the monarch, and this has led to several changes to British life. For the first time in over 70 years, money and stamps will bear someone else's image. The symbol found on UK mailboxes will be altered, as will the wording in British passports. In addition, the country has new words for its national anthem, God Save the King.
Okay, let's talk about the contents of today's lesson. Again, it's our News Watch unit for the month of March, and our first story is about getting water out of the air by using this magic sponge. It's not really a sponge in the ocean or one artificially manufactured out of, polyester or whatever. This is actually some kind of machine that is being called a sponge because it does what a sponge does. It sucks up water, in this case, sucking up water out of the air, or sucking water out of the air, I should say. And yes, it can collect water from desert air air. That means the air in a desert. I suppose they could do this any place. Here in Taiwan, of course, it's quite humid, and I suppose this device would need to be adjusted to fit local conditions in case there's a water shortage. But this particular device is being developed in Jordan, which is in the Mid-East, and that's a big desert there. So, yeah, it makes sense that they would make such a device here to get water for their thirsty citizens.
Yeah, it's a big, big desert in Jordan, which is in the Middle East. I can't imagine needing this type of machine here in Taiwan. We get so much water. So, yeah, they've invented a device that can harvest water from the air. Usually we use harvest to talk about bringing in crops that are grown in the fields. Farmers are busy raising different kinds of crops, and they harvest them when those types of foods they're growing are fully grown or ready to go to the market. So they're trying to harvest water from the air, even dry desert air. Now, I grew up in a very, very dry state in the United States. So I think I'd like one of these for the state of Arizona, which has dry desert air, at least in the southern part where I live. So this machine is composed of a special sponge, and we're using quotation marks around sponge because it's not really a sponge. We're calling it that just, to kind of compare it to those sponges, especially the ones we use when we're washing our dishes and we're cleaning, and we put lots of cleaning liquid. I was just doing my dishes before I came. Put cleaning liquid on a sponge and wash our dishes to get them clean and dry. Well, this is composed of a special kind of sponge made of metal centers linked by an organic carbon framework. If you're composed of something, that's what you're made up of. Now, we use composed of something, but you can actually compose something too. Without that preposition, you can compose an essay, you can compose a new song, you can compose a poem, so you can write that way. But if it's composed of something, that's what it's made of. That's the parts that are combined to make this new thing that you have.
Indeed, and for example, I could say the atmosphere of the Earth is composed of nitrogen, oxygen, and other trace gases. In this particular case, the machine is composed of a special sponge made of metal centers linked by an organic carbon framework. So in the middle, you've got these metal things of metal, things made out of metal in the center of this, and then it's connected to or linked by an organic carbon framework. A framework is when you have things lined up together and they kind of form a pattern. Of course, when you build a building, for example, oftentimes you see the framework go up first. You have all these girders, these metal pieces that form the shape of the building, and then they cover it with glass and metal and stuff like that. So yes, indeed, you've got this carbon framework. You might want to go online to see exactly what this machine looks like, but basically it's acting as a sponge, even though it technically isn't a sponge.
You can also use framework if you're talking about writing some special text, or maybe you're coming up with a program. Maybe you're a college professor, and the framework of the semester will be built on a couple of important principles, and then you fill in the smaller principles as you go along. I've been writing a program for my kids at church to sing, and so I've got a framework of some of the songs we're using, and then I'm going to fill in between what they say. So that framework is kind of a structure that you build around as you either build something real, like a building that Tom was talking about, or maybe a vehicle, or maybe you're building a program that I'm writing, or you're putting together a research paper and you've got a framework for it, and you just have to fill in the details as you go along.
Right, so you've got metal centers and an organic carbon framework, and this is a structure. So this structure allows it to capture water molecules in the air. We don't have time to go into exactly how it does that, but of course you can look that up online. But take it from us. This machine basically can take water out of the air, especially in very dry or arid regions. And these can later be squeezed out of the sponge as drinking water. So yes, indeed, we've got molecules of water, which is H2O. That's a molecule which is composed of different atoms bound together. And so the molecules are taken out of the air, and then they are they're squeezed out, I guess. They use some kind of mechanism or some kind of process to get the water out of the mechanism, to get it out of the framework, and then they can collect the water and then give it to people to drink, although they probably need to filter it or purify it or send it through a distiller or whatever. But still, it's a good way to get water in an area that doesn't have a lot of water to begin with.
Yeah. Tom used a word earlier that's really great. I'll just spell it for you. It's A-R-I-D, arid. Arid is an adjective, and it just means dry. So you might see arid used in front of the word desert or landscape, an arid desert, an arid landscape, meaning very dry. So it's just another synonym for dry, where you're talking about a place that just doesn't get much rain and doesn't have much water. So this is great. This is how it works. And they can later be squeezed out of the sponge. Again, it's not a real sponge. It's what they call this magic piece of equipment. They can squeeze water out as drinking water that can be used. Now, to deal with changes in temperature and humidity, the team devised an algorithm that allows the machine to harvest more water when conditions are ideal, but conserve power when they're not. So, if they happen to have a more humid, rainy day in Jordan, they would be very happy with that, I'm sure. They don't have a lot of days that are like that. They would want to, of course, take advantage of the high humidity so they could squeeze more water out of the air. When you talk about humidity, you're talking about water that is in the air. It may not be enough to rain, but you can feel it. Taiwan is very humid. We have very high humidity here, and it makes it sometimes really hot in the summer and tough to breathe because it's so humid. So humidity is the noun form and humid is the adjective. So you can talk about a place being very humid or there's a lot of humidity in that particular area.
Right, so it needs to adjust to changes in temperature and humidity. So the team devised an algorithm that allows the machine to harvest more water when conditions are ideal, but conserve power when they're not. So an algorithm, as you know, is just a computer program basically that responds to changes. And so basically this machine can shut down if there isn't really a lot of water in the air, but then it can kind of get working hard if there is a lot of humidity in the air. So the reason for that is to conserve power so that it does not waste power. And again, they probably have precious resources there in Jordan and they don't want to waste them.
That's right. So this boosts or brings up, if you boost something, you raise it, it goes up, it boosts its efficiency and means it can produce up to 35 liters of water per day at a pretty cheap price. We'll talk about that. So efficiency is the noun form of the adjective efficient. If something or someone, a person can be efficient, it means they don't waste time or energy or money. That's good too, but mostly it's just time and energy. So if you're a very efficient worker, then your boss probably loves you. You don't waste a lot of time. You get the job done, you finish the task, and you don't spend a lot of time chatting and surfing the internet. You're very efficient. So this actually will boost its efficiency, this machine's efficiency, because it has this algorithm that can tell when it needs to work harder or not work so hard because there's not a lot of humidity in the air. And it can produce up to 35 liters of water per day at a price that's 46% cheaper than bottled water. So it's even cheaper than going to the store and buying some water.
Sounds pretty cool, and experts say the machine and the framework it uses have the potential to solve water crises around the world. If something's potential, it's likely to happen in the future. So we've heard about this in the news. There are certain parts of the world that lack water. And what the team needs to do next is find ways to manufacture the device more cheaply and at a larger scale. Here, the word what is not making this a question. It just means the thing that the team needs to do next. What they need to do next. They got to figure out ways to manufacture or make this machine in a factory to make many copies of it to use in different places. It's right now probably pretty expensive to manufacture, so eventually they can lower the cost of manufacturing it, and then they can produce a lot of them and sell them to people around the world.
Right. We also use this phrase to manufacture on a larger scale. In fact, we use that more often in the U.S. We do something on a large scale or on a larger scale. On and at are both correct grammatically. You can pick the one you're more comfortable with. So when you manufacture, you make things on a large scale using machines or machinery. And they want to do that so it's a little more cheaper. If you're only manufacturing a couple things, the price goes up. So with government assistance or help, that's what assistance means. It hopes to produce units for households by mid-2023, which is very, very quick, I would say. It usually takes longer to produce things on a larger scale. So we look forward to seeing this. We hope it works. We're going to take a quick break, guys, and then we'll be back to talk about Queen Elizabeth's passing.
Okay, everybody, let's continue to talk about our lesson for today. The first story was about a magic sponge that can get water from the air in desert regions. Now we're going to talk about the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, and that marks the end of an era for the UK. The rest of us might be puzzled. Why is that such a big deal? Who cares? But for people in the UK, it is a big deal because she was the head of the government there, even though she didn't really have any great power, but still her presence kind of kept the country together.
Now, before we move on to this, let's look at this word era or era. You can pronounce it either way, E-R-A. It's just a long period of history, usually has some unique features or characteristics. For example, my favorite era for fashion is the Edwardian era, which actually comes from the UK as well. It's when King Edward was king, but I love the fashion from then. So we've got lots of different eras that we will talk about in history. This marks the end of an era for them because she ruled for a long, long time as queen. Now, she passed away on September 8th, 2022, and that marked the end of an era that closed that particular era of her reigning as queen. We're calling her the longest reigning monarch. Rain here is pronounced the same way as 下雨, or just that water that comes from the sky. But here, to reign is to be the ruler over a particular country or series of countries. She actually reigned over lots of countries at one point because UK had control of a lot of countries earlier on in the 1900s. A monarch is just someone who is either a king or a queen ruling over a country.
She's also the leader or was the leader of like Australia and Canada and places in the Commonwealth. You'll see her portrait. Well, you did see her portrait on the coins and the money in those countries as well. I saw that first when I went to Canada. What's this lady on the coin here? What is that? Don't you know, you ignorant American? We're a Commonwealth country, and that's our queen. But in any case, they'll have to change the portrait now. And if we talk about the monarch ruling a country, we often say they're on the throne. That, of course, is the royal seat where she sits when talking to lords and ladies and stuff like that. And so she was on the throne for 70 years and 214 days. Now, the UK entered a period of national mourning following the Queen's death. So here, mourning with a U in there just means you're sad about the passing of someone and you're conducting yourself in a solemn way. You're not going to parties. You're watching TV in black and white and things like that. There's probably a period of national mourning where certain activities are probably restricted and people have to behave a certain way.
Yeah, I wanted to mention before we move on, though, Tom, throne is used in a funny kind of way that has nothing to do with kings and queens. Sometimes you'll hear someone say, where's John or where's Susie? Oh, they're on the throne. That means they're in the bathroom on the toilet. So this is slang, and you'll hear it sometimes, especially in movies or TV shows. Again, it's very informal. I doubt they use this in the UK, but we use it all the time in America. So, because we don't have a king or a queen, so the throne doesn't mean too much to us. But the throne, they actually have a ceremonial chair. So when really ceremonial procedures take place in these countries with monarchs, you'll see this beautiful chair. That's actually their throne. But they can be on the throne in sort of an informal way just by being the ruler. And as Tom said, if you're mourning, it's a period of time where you're really sad about the passing of someone. It could be someone, a political figure like this, or it could be someone in your family. So you can be in mourning. We'll hear that often used. If someone's in mourning, they may not want to go out and be at parties for a while. You know, it's hard when you lose people that you love. So there was a period of national mourning following the Queen's death. I know that they canceled a lot of TV shows during this time because I'm a big fan of the Great British Bake Off, which is a show about baking, and they didn't have the Great British Bake Off the week of mourning because it was too fun. So I had to wait a week to watch my show. But that's what they did in the UK. Now, before the state funeral, state meaning the political funeral that is organized by the country itself. It took place on September 19th. Before that, they had the Queen's body lay in state. What is that, Tom?
That means it's just laying there, or I should say lying there, for people to see and pay your respects or whatever. This happens oftentimes when a leader passes away. You can go someplace and walk past the casket where the body is put, and you'll pay your respects. You might kneel down or something like that, or bow, however they do that. And that means that her coffin or her casket was placed in a public building, which of course was Westminster Hall. And this allowed members of the public to pay their respects, as I said. So people had to line up for this in order to pay their respects. And I got to admire their perseverance there to wait in line or queue for so long is actually showing great dedication to your queen.
Yeah, we'll get in line in America for something, but they will queue up or queue in the UK in British English. So yeah, a lot of them were standing in line for a long time. There was some gossip that made the newspapers about some famous people who got to go to the front of the line because they were famous.
Oh, no.
And a lot of people were upset about that.
Special privileges.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're famous, I guess. And some of these people were on TV and they were trying to defend themselves, you know, that they had waited for a while. But yeah, if you're waiting in line or in queue for what? For 25 hours, I'd be mad at some of these people who went to the front of the line just because they were famous. So the line was approximately 16 kilometers long. That's quite long, with people waiting around, like I said, 25 hours to say farewell. A farewell is kind of a formal word that we used instead of saying goodbye. They were in line to say goodbye. They were in line, or we said goodbye to our friends as they made their way to the airport. Farewell is formal, a little bit more formal, and it's also something that you'll see more in written English rather than spoken English.
Indeed, so they said farewell and then they went back home and resumed their normal lives. And now we've got the king, King Charles III. He is now the monarch, he's now the king, and this has led to several changes to British life. We can only touch on a few of them here. For the first time in over 70 years, money and stamps will bear someone else's image. So, like I said before, the Queen's image was on coins and stamps and bills for a long time in pretty much all the countries of the Commonwealth. My example was traveling to Canada when I was a kid and seeing the money there with the Queen's portrait on it. And I believe that's the case in other countries as well. But that's going to change now because, hey, she's no longer with us. She's gone. She has passed away. She has bought the farm, I guess you could say.
Oh, that's very slang and funny, so be careful.
Yeah, I probably
use
shouldn't
that.
use that term to talk about the Queen, who is a highly revered figure. I take that back.
By some, yeah.
But in any case, yes, indeed, they do have to make some changes here. And the first, most obvious change will be that the money and the stamps will have someone else's image. And I don't know if they've started to mint those coins yet or to print out those stamps yet, but it might be interesting to see exactly what Charles looks like as represented on coins and money and stamps.
He's not exactly young, and she was 96 when she passed away. So I would assume that her government had prepared all of these things in advance so that as soon as she passed away, they could get busy printing new money, paper money and coins and making the changes they needed to. I was just looking up how many countries she reigned over during her lifetime. At one point, she was the reigning queen over 32 sovereign states or countries. At the time of her death, their kingdom had been reduced to 15. So she was still reigning queen over 15 of them, which is still quite a few. So there were a lot of people that were keyed in or checking out or paying close attention to her health and how she was doing. Now, King Charles, like I said, he's not exactly young. He's in his 70s. And we know his son that takes over after King Charles, of course, is Prince William, who is quite young, and they have a young family. His wife is Kate or Catherine, and so they will be in line to become the next monarchy. He'll be king, and his wife will be queen. Of course, King Charles's wife, current wife, is Camilla, and then his first wife, who is already gone, who passed away, who was very well loved, is Diana. So we've got this unique family who's well known around the world. If you're king or queen of a place like the UK, you'll be well known, at least among English-speaking countries. So for the first time in over 70 years, you're going to see money and stamps that will have someone else's image, and that will be King Charles.
Okay, so that's one change, and the symbol found on UK mailboxes will be altered or changed to accommodate the new monarch, as will the wording in British passports. So I've never held a British passport before, so I don't know exactly what the wording in the passport is, what the phrases are inside, but I guess basically it will be just changing the word queen to king or something like that, and changing Her Majesty to His Majesty,
right,
and things like that. And in addition, the country has new words for its national anthem, God Save the King, which you might be familiar with. But what I'm really curious about myself is if that famous punk band who had a song called God Save the Queen, I wonder if they're going to change the lyrics when they perform that song to God Save the King, and what word they're going to use to rhyme with the word king.
Interesting. Just so you know, God Save the King or God Save the Queen. Save here just means protect and keep safe so that they live a long life. So we send our good wishes over to the UK. And this big change is coming about. It is a huge change for a lot of us. Okay, now we can't listen to our Chinese teacher because today is our all-English unit. So we hope you learned quite a bit. Take a look at some of these terms and study them a little bit harder. You may see them on a test.
Okay, so thanks for joining us, and please join us next time. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.